Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book from Waterside Press. It's got an intriguing title, The Day the King Died, A Terrible Miscarriage of Justice. It's been written by Jim Morris. There's a foreword by Glyn Maddocks, and Waterside Press, who've produced this, their motto is putting justice into words. That's exactly what they've done. The title we've given this review is as follows. Jim Morris gives another strong reason why capital punishment is totally wrong. Compulsory reading for all who oppose judicial homicide. I'll come on to that in a minute. Let's look at the book and what it means. That's the front cover. It's a field. You can see what you have there. There's the spine, and you can see the back. There's a picture of the deceased. That is the man who's the subject of the terrible miscarriage of justice. His name is Alfred Moore. That's his building there. And there are various points. It says a fresh look at the case of Alfred Moore. And he said, "My lord, I protest my innocence. I am not guilty." That's when he was sentenced to death and then hanged. Now, the book itself, let me just show you the internet. It's not very big in terms of a book, 200 odd pages. Let me start at the back. You can see there's a bit of advertising for previous Waterside Press books, many of which are very, very good. They're well produced books. The index is not a big index. It's good enough for what it needs. It's not exactly extensive in any way. There is an epilogue at the back, the aftermath of what happened and the fact that this case has been continuing for some years. At the front, you've got the page there, the beginning. Then you've got the actual chapter headings. There are 25 of them in total there. Then there's actually what's called an epilogue at the back after his execution, and there's an index. Then there's some acknowledgements, details about the author and the foreword itself. This is the story of Alfred Moore from Huddersfield. Then there's an introduction about George VI, who died on the 6th of February 1952. In fact, that's the day that Moore was hanged. There's a bit more of the introduction, and then you get into the book itself, starting off with who he was and running all the way through. And you can see here there's quite a lot of interesting cross-examination content from the parties actually in court. Anyway, I'm going to leave you to think yourself about what you feel about the case when you read the book. Let me tell you about why you should read it and what it's really all about. Because what we're talking about here, you have to put the case in its time frame. It's another excellent and well researched book from Waterside, who've courageously taken on the task of publishing a further example of why judicial homicide should never return, even though half the planet still practice it. Will they never learn? Waterside Press has put justice into words yet again with this book. I'll explain why. The experienced writer Jim Morris provides sufficient meticulous evidence, in our view, to substantiate a strongly held feeling that the entire justice process in Moore's case was both unsafe and unsatisfactory. Whatever the faceless public servants say about this today, and other clearly bad miscarriages of justice that they have wished to cover up in the past to keep their consciences clean. And let's face it, that's exactly what a lot of these people are about. They don't want to admit that they're wrong because they can't for a lot of reasons. Also, once a decision has been made, they don't feel they want to interfere with it. You are dealing with people's lives and deaths, so perhaps it might be something they would wish to consider if it was their life on the block. The subject then of this book is Alfred Moore, and his clearly unappealing activities from virtually day one. His life was a mess from the start, as you can see, but the issue remains as to whether he was a killer, and it seems quite clear that the beyond reasonable doubt concept we have was discounted in his case by the legal profession, one of many, unfortunately, as examples of what did happen. This was at a time when a very large number of people were being executed on an annual basis. Morris has produced a readable and highly detailed account of the events in Moore's life and death, and Moore's case continues to receive substantial publicity after his hanging even today. It was the day that George VI died that he was hanged. It was an hour earlier, so he was duly executed, and it's a blatant wrong in our view that can never really be righted when you hang someone, because the Home Office, the appeal system, the other people involved continue to ignore the protests. There's never any sort of give and take in this. The book then is doubly welcome, we feel, for highlighting what took place in 1951 and 52. There were people murdered. A person they thought did it was found guilty and hanged. The point is, it's a reminder as the second issue of why we shouldn't do things the way they did them then in the future. Apart from a hanging, it's looking at the way, in fact, that the trial went. There were police officers who were murdered, and therefore one can understand the feelings that were running within the members of the police service itself, and obviously much wider views from the public, who expect our police officers to lay down their lives if necessary in the line of duty, and that's exactly what they do. Now, someone did it. The question is, was it Moore? And you know the basic principle, if there's any doubt, you get off. It didn't happen with him. Let me continue. It's unfortunate, of course, that we'll never know the real events of the 15th of July 1951. But this book does show up some less savoury aspects and attitudes of members of the bar and the judiciary at that time, for the sort of people they were then. Pretty biased, frankly, against certain classes of people, frankly using evidential proof, I would suggest, in the wrong way to get rid of undesirable people. And it's not only just this example, there are rather a lot of them. I'm not saying that many, but one is bad enough. Waterside Press then is gaining a high reputation for quality and content of these types of title which they publish, and The Day the King Died is one such title. We're intrigued by the title, of course, itself, and this quaint British convention, which I didn't even know existed, whereby executions were stopped and a sentence commuted, is scheduled to take place on the day the sovereign died. How odd. But possibly such a convention may have its roots, of course, in the link between capital punishment and religion, as the sovereign is the top person in the country before God. So there's a teeny wee bit of a saving grace here, isn't there, when thou shalt not kill becomes thou shalt kill because thou has murdered someone. The point is that you've got to the top person before God in trying to actually commute something because that particular person is beginning to meet his maker. Well, it's all very intriguing. And as I say, quaint. We don't obviously have that anymore because we have abolished capital punishment. However, I would suggest it's a pretty pathetic way of assuaging one's conscience, especially if you are a completely faceless public servant. Of course, in a primitive society which practices judicial homicide, then quaint British conventions like this make it all right, presumably, as a sort of medieval blood money to God for the conscience, just in case there's a hereafter. Frankly, the whole thing's totally unsatisfactory because you should look at the evidence. The evidence isn't good enough. It's as simple as that. Equally unfortunate, of course, we can't interview George VI for his views one way or the other, even if we were allowed to do so, to examine a prerogative of mercy, which of course we wouldn't be allowed to do. But the title of this book is a stark reminder of why the state should not judicially kill people, because there is a doubt here, and it's quite clear to me there's a doubt, and I'd have thought to anybody reading the book that there are doubts, because they didn't find the weapon apart from anything else. And there's only one problem. There weren't any other killings of a comparable nature afterwards in that area, although when one looks at it, it could well have been someone a little bit like the incident of the white Uno car, which always seems to appear from nowhere and then disappears. It's the old story again of identification. Big problem, but we do give the benefit of the doubt. So, The Day the King Died as a book we feel should be compulsory reading for all law students and criminologists who are going to become associated or are associated with our modern criminal justice system, the processes we have. We learned something from Jim Morris. You can't bring back the dead to ask him questions, whether it's a sovereign or the subject of a hanging. All we've got is this book, and I think it's a good contribution. and a good reminder as to the way we should be looking at how we do things in the future. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Waterside Press, for the courage of publishing this. Bye-bye.